All right, so there's a scene I really love in the 1980s movie, The Blues Brothers. This is not a recent or topical reference, and I apologize. In the scene, the Blues Brothers, Jake and Elwood, have gone through a lot of adventures and some really phenomenal musical numbers to get their band back together. But now they need a gig. So they walk into the first bar that they find, and they pretend to be the band that's supposed to play that night. And Elwood asks, "What kind of music do you usually have here?" You know, setting himself up for success. And the owner says, "Oh, we got both kinds. We got country and Western." And in the movie, like, the bartender is the butt of the joke, which, like, on one hand, it's a really good line. But even once they're aware of this context, our heroes here, they still assume that their usual way of working is going to be right. They still assume that the crowd will like their music. And they launch into their regular blues set, and it doesn't go that great. It's funny that they can see, and we as the audience can see the bubble that the bartender is in, but they can't see their own until people throw beer bottles at their heads. And then they definitely see their own context. So what I want to talk about today is how to notice our own bubble, ideally without anyone throwing beer bottles at us. My name is Tanya. I'm a senior principal software engineer at Squarespace, working on platforms these days. But I come from the SRE tradition, the SRE milieu, if you will. I am from Ireland, where you'll see these amazing little robins all over the place. They're wonderful. But about 14 years ago, I moved to New York. That's the cardinal here. And now, as of last summer, I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is not where I saw my life taking me, but it's actually really great. And Albuquerque has these small dinosaurs that just walk around, that like it's no big deal. Roadrunners are real, who knew? I'm still adjusting. So I wrote this book last year, The Staff Engineer's Path, and I host Lead Dev's Staff Plus conference, which runs in New York and London. Running a conference is a lot of work, and it's really rewarding, and I really recommend it. But if you see an SREcon organizer later today, say thank you, because it is a ton of work, and they did an amazing job. Finally, my kid tells me that I should be putting her in my bio because she is important, and she's not wrong. I have an extraordinarily great kid. She does not look like this. This is her sloth, whose name is Sloth. So who likes getting into fights on the internet? Liz definitely likes getting into fights on the internet, yes. Okay. I do not personally, but it seems to be popular. Like, should you deploy on Fridays? I don't care if you deploy on Fridays. Deploy on Fridays if you want. But a lot of people do care. A lot of our speakers over the last few days, including our plenaries, have referred to kind of popular internet fights. Like on Monday, Corey mentioned people having strong, entrenched positions. He called it a slap fight, which I love, on on-prem versus cloud. Charity talked about how she used to fight on the internet about what observability means. Niall mentioned how much we worry about what SRE is and who we are and what it all means. And I think they kind of, well, said, you know, these fights weren't necessarily productive, which is true. But it's also kind of normal that we get into arguments that don't matter to other people because we're zoomed right up on a thing. It's right there in front of us. Things that are relatively small and right in front of us can seem bigger than things that are huge but far away. This picture is from an Irish sitcom from a long time ago, and it's both not a topical reference and not a local reference. So two people in the room will get it, and I want you both to know that I appreciate you. Careful now, etc. Okay, my guess is that people will have heard of the idea of bike shedding, or C. Northcote Parkinson's law of triviality. In case not, the idea is that if you bring a plan for something really huge, and his example is a nuclear power plant, then people mostly assume you know what you're doing. It's like it's too big to review, kind of. Whereas if it's small, and the example is always a bike shed, you will be in an infinite number of arguments and discussions and Google Docs comment threads. A true story about this picture is that I used it on a previous slide deck once, and someone reviewed the deck, and literally the only comment they left on the deck was to suggest a better picture of a bike shed. This is true, and they weren't being ironic, and I will love it forever. The way we talk typically about bike shedding is that, that we focus on the thing that's easy. And that's actually not how I see it in reality, or at least in my reality. I see it more that people zoom in on the thing they are interested in, the thing they really, really care about, because they can see it super clearly. So I heard about this concept of bike shedding for years, but I only recently, like last couple of weeks, discovered how it came into tech. Do people tend to know this story? I'm going to tell it anyway. But it's from a thread on the FreeBSD mailing list in 1999. Now, if you don't know, FreeBSD is a free open source Unix operating system. The FreeBSD community has a philosophy around engineering it to be right from the start, as opposed to letting it grow organically. And there had been a big fight in the community, back in 1999, about the behavior of the sleep command when given fractional seconds. This is very important. And this guy, Paul, I skipped too soon, Paul Henning-Kamp sent this amazing email. You can read the whole thing on bikeshed.com, and I really recommend that you do, because it's just a freaking delight. But he said it was a proposal to make sleep do the right thing if given a non-integer argument that set this particular grass fire off. I'm not going to say any more about it than that, because it's a much smaller item than one would expect given the length of the thread, and it's already received far more attention than some of the problems we have around here. And I mean, if anyone here wants to tell me they haven't been in that particular situation, I'm not going to believe you, because we do this all the time. We care about things, and we get these really, really long threads getting into the nuance of something that people outside our context would be like, why do you care? And we care because we care. We care because we're up close. We're right up close, and we're looking at it. And up close, the new elements of the thing reveal themselves to us. It's sort of fractal. The closer you get, the more you can see. It gets bigger. And that's kind of amazing. And honestly, I think everything is interesting up close. And I'm increasingly amazed by this. Like, I've wondered sometimes why people get so into things like that I just don't get. Like, why do you care about this? But I think it's because, like, when you get right up here, you can see the beauty of it. You can see all of the ways it's complex and fascinating and amazing that you're right there. I was talking to someone, an investment banker, recently, and he was telling me about different kinds of financial instruments and a problem he was trying to solve. And I was like simultaneously like, I don't get this, and I can see that you love it, and I get that. I can see that you see a beauty in here. And I think that explains why we are like we are, like why we care. It also explains another phenomenon that Professor Parkinson pointed out. He called it orgmanship, which is to constantly want to increase the number of staff for every single team and every single organization. And he said it's like a modern malady is galloping orgmanship, which I really love. And it's not badly intended, I think. None of us are messing around, but we got up close, and so we can see all of the ways we can make this beautiful thing that we're interested in be better. And because they're up close, our little beautiful toy plastic cow seems as big and important as the one, the bigger problems far away. Have you ever seen a team say, we have completed all of our P0 goals, so we're giving our headcount back? Me either. When we get up close to something, it means we make local decisions based on what we need, what our own thing needs, even if it's sort of objectively worse for everyone else. And so we build these completely daft machines that every group has optimized for their own pieces and adding their own reliability functions on top of their reliability functions and getting fractally confusing. And if we were to step back and look at the whole system, maybe we would remove a whole lot of it. But that would mean maybe removing our own parts and taking ourselves out of that particular machine. And we're just not really optimized for that because we're in our own bubble. Similarly, when we're trying to convince other people to do something, we're the Blues Brothers in the country and western bar. We just play our regular tunes. Have you seen this? Where you're like, come on, colleague in another department. We're all going over here. We're going to upgrade our version of a tool. It's going to be great. You don't know you're using it. You didn't know you had this config. It's a breaking change. Let's go. And you know, your colleague is like, nope, that doesn't sound like a thing I care about. You're like, I don't know. Well, we're moving from open tracing to open telemetry. It's really important. You'll like it. And they're like, nope. We're like, you know, you're going to get super wide cardinality span. And they're like, I don't know what that means. Why are you telling me things? Please go away. It'll take 5 minutes. You'll learn. And they're like, nope. Of course they're like, nope. They're like, I have to do my taxes. I need to floss. I need to be anxious about the thing that was on the news today. I need to parse the 10-page email I got from my kid's school and figure out if it's closed for Norwegian Constitution Day or Administrative Day Drinking Day or whatever is happening this week. I don't have time to think about the thing you just told me. Also, I have a day job with OKRs that are not this. We need to play a different song that relates to their context, not to our context. Otherwise, I'm going to do one more because this makes me happy. Nope. We can miss when our up-close thing is just not everybody else's. And I think that's really funny, because in other contexts, we are amazing at understanding whether something's significant. Like, you get paged, and you go to the dashboard that all of the hardcore observability people have just spent the last 3 days telling you is just a picture of your last outage. And they're not wrong, but you have this dashboard, and so do I. And you know, you're looking, and you see a spike that kind of correlates with the page you just got, and you just zoom in to double check and convince yourself, yeah, it lines up. But then what do? I know what you all do. You zoom out, because you want to see if it's actually significant. And maybe you don't even know you do this, because if you've been in a kind of an SRE or like that kind of role for 10 minutes, this is like a thing you start doing. It's this particular set of experiences gives us this non-obvious instinct. But then when it comes to work experiences or life experiences, the right now seems really, really significant. And the right here seems really significant. And we don't really look around and see, is this a spike? Is this real? Is this a thing? What if you zoom out more, by the way? What happens? Nothing happens. You go to months or you go to years? We don't have that data. Of course we don't. What happened 5 years ago? We have no idea. You get an empty graph because there's no data, or you get timeouts and errors, or in the spiciest case, one of your colleagues asks you to stop punching the graphing service, you know, but tell them from me they should have better user isolation. As an engineering discipline, we are focused on right now. And when we're talking about on-call, like, fair enough. You know, we don't need a 5-year graph for on-call. I sort of wonder sometimes, maybe security people do sometimes, like, has this thing been here for a long time? Most of the time, we do not. But there are lots of times we do need a long view, and we just don't optimize it. Like, maybe your build pipeline gets a little slower every time, you know, a shared build pipeline, every time another team starts using it or adding a new kind of test. How much slower? Well, it's still under SLO. Yeah, but is it slower than last year? Or you're doing a migration. Has anyone done a migration that took years to finish? Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry for your lives and mine too, but if it's a long migration, do you know how it's going? Like, really? You know, we have a 5-year view on business metrics. Your company definitely has a 5-year view on the money and how that's going, but we don't on the kind of more operational stuff. When I want something like that for a migration, which I always do, the thing I end up doing is I set myself a reminder to write down a number every week or every month, and I put it in like a CSV file, and then I run NewPlot over it at intervals, or I put it in a spreadsheet or something. And I think I'm weird that I do even that, but this is just not a thing that our part of the industry optimizes for. Anyway, that was a digression. When we're zoomed in, things look bigger, and so we get into fights. Which of these is right, by the way? Does anyone have an opinion on that? Like, which way should we do? Which way should we run services in production? When we're up close and we're staring at something like this, we can get into fights on the internet about, like, not even what's the best way to run services in production, but like, what do these words mean? Here is a perfect taxonomy. And people really, really, really care. They really care. DevOps engineers in the room, and I know there are some. If you're a DevOps engineer, please consider that you might not be real. We tried to set up Void camp tests, but I'm just going to get you to do reCAPTCHAs on the way out, you know. I really like this one that is like, you are not a DevOps engineer. It's like, okay, time and therapy, we will get through this. By the way, this is not related to anything, but I was looking at titles, and I learned that some companies have a role that is a platform DevOps engineer, which I think, and I think actually there may be someone here with that title. If you're here, you're very cool. But I think that's a super efficient way to just stress out people, like multiple people at once who really care about what words mean. I found production DevOps engineer. I found platform reliability engineer. I found SRE, but the S is for service. I like that. That's a good fight to have on the internet. And I found SRE engineer, which is a site reliability engineer. Yeah, that's right. N+1 on engineer. This has nothing to do with anything at all. It just makes me happy, and doing things that make you happy is good. Right, so as I said some time ago, I am currently in a platform engineering organization, sort of / shared service organization. But I come from actually a sysadmin background. Coming from a sysadmin start, my instincts are to assume that all problems are DNS until proven otherwise. And there are other sysadmin people here, other people in that milieu. Honestly, my first instinct to solve a problem is to wire together like a whole lot of sed and awk and kind of horrible things, but you know, it kind of works. I actually joined Google as a sysadmin in the sysops group, and then sysops got reorged into SRE. So that's why I came into SRE. And a lot of SREs did not like that at the time. One person said that adding sysops to SRE was, and I quote, diluting the SRE brand. Which, I mean, it felt great for us coming into that. That person really, really cared about what SRE meant. But, you know, we sysops integrated, and we probably diluted some, but I feel like we earned our keep. We're okay. This is me on, I think, my first trip to San Francisco, extremely enjoying being part of a community and being part of the kind of us feeling of like, oh, I'm in a thing, it's really good. Google was really cool back then. Like, it really legit was. The cutting edge technology, there were just super smart people. My colleagues were smart. I was a dumbass. My colleagues were smart. But more importantly, it felt like a very hopeful time. There was a strong sense of, look, you can invest in people and treat your employees well and make the world better and still be a profitable company. That was a very nice feeling. I'm not going to do a whole thing on why a lot of Google people have a sense of kind of loss and like almost like a sense of grief right now, but it really was it felt like a special time, and I feel lucky and privileged to have been part of it. But when you're zoomed up on a culture, you can miss some of the ways it's not that awesome. A lot of SRE teams at the time were really into drinking whiskey. It's fine, in the office, at their desks. And that's where all the social events were. And looking back now, there must have been colleagues who were really struggling with that. Statistically, there had to have been. That was kind of not an awesome thing to do to our colleagues, to set up that much booze beside their desks, But we didn't see it, because we were so in our own bubble. I'm really glad SRE is sort of equally into tea these days. But also, the Goog, or L-Goog, was kind of all-encompassing in those days. And if you weren't at Google, but you had friends who went to Google, it was like, we got weird. I think a lot of big companies can be like this, where the company becomes the source of, maybe your gym is in the office, maybe your doctor's office is in the office, your social life for sure is in the office, all of your meals are provided by the office, your major relationships start revolving around the office. It becomes the village you're living in. And your world's getting smaller and you don't really notice it. And of course, we didn't see what was happening outside in the rest of tech. Like for a lot of us in Google SRE, when we left Google, we were like, oh, there's this thing called DevOps, and we had just missed it. We didn't know. All the rest of the industry was like, where have you been? And we were like, Google. It was not invented here. But our worlds got smaller. It was special, but our worlds got smaller. So with the context of SRE, we kind of had this feeling that we had solved all of the problems. I mean, there were new problems to solve, but only other SREs would tell us how to solve them. We had figured out how to run software in production, and everybody who wasn't us was doing it wrong. And you see this talking to, or if you were there at the time, Googlers were obnoxious. We didn't mean to be, we didn't know we were, but we were kind of obnoxious. Googlers are better now, you're all okay. Right, everyone else is doing it wrong is a lovely way to feel as a community. It ties you together. And of course, nobody in the group started out with the opinion that everyone else was doing it wrong. You drifted into it. Because our opinions are changed by who we're surrounded by. It's really hard to avoid. Your baseline moves for what's normal, and you drift into formation with all of the other people. It's like how in general, people in different generations have different, in general, but on average, many caveat, people in different generations often have different perspectives. It's not that people are born better or worse people, or, oh, the next generation is very lazy or whatever. It's like, people aren't born different. There's a different context. They have a different median journey, a different median group of people around them. And we're all taking a journey all the time into a new perspective. Like, you don't see the journey, but we're all doing it. And then it's funny, because we fight with people who are taking a similar journey. Like, Leah Kistner talked about security and SRE. It's like, we're trying to solve the same problems, and then we end up having dumb fights. And you see people who are kind of at a different stage in the same journey, and you argue with them. Like, I think a big source of internet fights is between just people who are in different stages of the same journey, which is so wasteful, right? Like, you see someone says, oh, we just learned about postmortems, and we're going to start doing them so we can find the root cause. And like, ideally, we would say, that's great, but SREs make a noise like a cat having a bath. And we're like, you can't say root cause, also we're calling them retros now. But these are people who are doing the thing that we want. They're on the journey. They just got to hear, celebrate with them. Also, then maybe they'll want to hang out with you and hear more from you rather than, no, you're doing it wrong. The stuff that seems obvious to us is not obvious. None of this is just like objective truth that we can see. We took a journey to our opinions. And it's easy to forget that, I think. And when we're up close with the opinions, we kind of don't see that they're just, the state that we have found right now, the place that we have gotten to. And we don't know that other people have a different point of view. Talking to John Allsway yesterday, he told me this is called perspective contrast. So I read an academic paper now, but before that I felt like I had invented it. But here's a story about perspective contrast. The time I, an SREcon person, went to an architecture conference. So, the first thing that I was surprised by at the architecture conference was that I didn't really know anybody. And I go to conferences, but I didn't know these people. I didn't know the speakers, hadn't heard of them, and I walked across the room, I wasn't meeting people that I knew. That was kind of unusual for me for the other conferences that I went to. I think reliability and architecture, very connected. We've had great architecture talks here. I thought there would be a ton of overlap, and there was none. The second thing I noticed was that basically everyone was a dude. Like, we joke that there, about rooms where there were more beards than women. There were so many beards. It was a whole thing. But the most surprising thing to me was that the people on stage were saying stuff that didn't make sense. Like, we have to remove the myth that one person draws up the designs for the software and hands it to a team to implement without the team getting to change it. Like, literally nobody believes that, sir. Why are you telling us this? When I think about architecture, I think about failure domains and blast radius and redundancy and fallback plans and observability so you can see what's going on everywhere. And nobody was talking about these things. Nobody mentioned operations or production. Just like, your fancy architecture, how do you expect to run it, sir? Someone was talking about APIs, and they didn't mention testing or versioning or user isolation. Sitting there, my customary space in the front row, all like, but you left out the most important things about APIs, sir. Someone did bring up monitoring, and I was like, here we go. And they said, you should have monitoring for your services to make sure they're running. True. But it wasn't like, here's how to finesse the state-of-the-art monitoring that you obviously already have as part of your baseline. And so I'm sitting in the room like, oh man, you should have monitoring? I mean, I'm a little embarrassed for you, because you think you're saying something novel, but everyone in the room already knows this. No, they didn't. They didn't. People were taking notes. And I want to be clear, because I think this is really important. I am not laughing at the architecture people. I'm laughing at me, because it was a different context. And I was showing up thinking that they would be exactly like and exactly into the context I had come from before. Because although they weren't talking about production or operations, they were saying you need to be this tall to do microservices before we were. They were talking about domain-driven design and ubiquitous language and fitness functions and non-functional requirements, of which reliability is only one, and Conway's law and writing architectural decision records before we were, and making your front end scale and so on. Before that had shown up anywhere else that I had seen. And it was just a completely different tech subculture with completely different knowledge. It was probably, if I had been able to zoom in more, a lot of different tech subcultures in the same way that we are, but not just like one single architect beard subculture. So while my initial reaction was, this group of people don't know the things that I know, lol, I had to take a little bit of a journey to realize they know different things. This is really, really good. I can learn so much here. And thinking about it later, I could imagine someone coming to SREcon and having kind of that same experience. So imagine someone coming and saying, so I went to this alleged reliability conference, and can you believe nobody mentioned null pointer exceptions? Did you see the thing about the Biden-Harris administration telling us that they recommend we should use memory-safe languages? I have to admit, in my headcanon, It's like Kamala Harris was doing a whole lot of code review, and at some point, she's just like, can anybody in this administration transfer ownership of a pointer? Okay, look, we're just all writing Rust. I'm pretty sure that's how it happened. Anyway, my point is, I didn't learn about null pointer exceptions at SREcon. Or like, another one, someone coming from another area of tech could say, these reliability people, they're really fairly focused on backend. There were some great front-end talks. They're mostly focused on backend. And they almost never talk about how accessibility issues can stop people getting to a site. And browser compatibility issues can. And lack of language support, internationalization, can stop people using a site. They don't know anything about reliability. And they're not wrong. It's just a different perspective. And look, like we're here for 3 days, and I am not saying that we should cover every single aspect of reliability that anybody could think about. But it's good for us when we can get out of our bubbles, right? And we hear new voices, and we get new perspectives, and we find new things to argue about. That's important too. I actually think the SREcon is really good for perspective, for bringing a lot of perspectives together, because we really are a ton of subcultures. I'm going to move on from this one fast before people realize I left them out by accident. But with the operations people and the resilience people and the learning from incidents people and the infrastructure people and the tooling people and the I Miss the Lisa conference people, and we all come here together. And it's incredibly cool. Like, that's our strength. We are what people used to call a melting pot. But I was reading about that, and I realized that people don't like that expression anymore. This was new to me. It makes sense, because it implies that the individual pieces melt together and become homogeneous. And we actually don't want that. That's a fragile system. We want all of these different perspectives. The strength of the community is that all of these different perspectives are true. Not that one is right, and everyone should choose which one is right, and we should all become this exact kind of thing. There are lots of specialities, and that's good. Like, I want a whole lot of opinionated nerds nerding out on the thing that they really like that I don't care about at all. Like, that's the society I want to live in. I want us to keep coming to conferences and arguing about stuff that anyone outside our context would think is completely stupid. That's great. That's how we advance our knowledge, and we advance the state of the art. And really, that's the society I want to live in. But while all of that is happening, we still kind of need to read the room and pay attention to what's going on everywhere else. Because the other risk of being really zoomed in is that you miss the journey that people are taking outside your bubble. And you miss how the world just changed. And you can miss what's happening that affects you as well. So of course, there's this metaphor people use all the time, the boiling frog. And they say, you put a frog in boiling water and it will jump out, but if you slowly heat the water, it'll stay in it. This is not true. Frogs do not behave like this, or at least I thought they didn't, until I read, I did not read this book, but I read about this guy, Friedrich Goltz, who was doing frog experiments in the 1800s because they didn't have internet yet. And he said in this book, apparently, which I, again, did not fact check, but Wikipedia has taken a journey to being a surprisingly reliable source of information. That's the reality we live in. He said that the frog stays in the water if you have removed its brain. No internet yet, I'm telling you. But he said an intact frog jumps out. Isn't that a dystopian phrase, an intact frog? Anyway, unless your brain is connected and online, it can be very hard to see how normal shifts over time. You cannot even see your own perspective shifting. It's like continually blows my mind. I have an opinion on something, and then I find something that I wrote 10 years ago where I had a different opinion, and I'm like, how did that happen? But that happens. We don't really have a strong view over time. You know what would be great for that? Would be a freaking 5-year dashboard, but okay. We have to find our own way of noticing what's changing, and noticing what's changing to us, and noticing how we're changing. Like, for example, Dr. Maslach yesterday talked about the symptoms of burnout. Do we notice if we have a higher frequency of, so don't use the word symptoms, in fact, but the metrics, the things that you can measure. Do we know if we have a higher frequency of those this year than last year? I think most of us don't. we should be keeping records of how we are and what's going on. And whether the thing that we care about is considered relevant by the rest of the world. Because tech moves really fast. So the thing I like doing, because I'm a freaking nerd, is looking at old newspapers to see what things people were saying about technologies or life. And I found this one from 1982, where it said, office networks. Are they really going to be a thing? You could carry the floppy disk down the hall. 1982. Like, I know this is 42 years ago and no one was alive then or whatever, but I was too. Okay, 1989. We think email is probably going to be a thing, but could it become as universal as the fax machine? Could it, though?
Not in government.
1997. There's this nerd thing called Linux. Students are using it. Do you think it could be useful for business? More importantly, though, we're still saying cyberscape and meaning it. Cyberscape. Then I get to Y2K. And some of us in this room remember how hard we had to work to patch everything in the freaking universe so that everybody could tell us it was a non-event. And we are still resentful. But the apocalypse is coming. And a lot of you will find out in 2038 how much of a non-event it was. And all of us Y2K people are on vacation that week. It is only fair. Okay. 2008. This cloud thing, is it real? Larry Ellison from Oracle does not think so. He said there's no money in it. 2008, not that long ago. And I want to be clear, I'm not laughing at people for being wrong in any of these. We don't know. We never know what's going to change. Look at this one. I love this. This is 10 years ago. When a user takes a photo, the app should check whether they're in a national park. That's easy. You can do that. And it should check whether the photo is of a bird. Basically impossible. 5-year research project. How long would it take you right now if you wanted to check if a picture was of a bird? Like, you can probably write that on your phone right now while listening to me talking. I had forgotten as well. This is a true story. I was looking for pictures, like that one of me at the start of Google. I was like, why? The start of me at Google. Google had been around. I was like, why can't I find more pictures of it? Oh, yeah, because there was a time when we didn't all have a camera in our pocket all the time. That is a thing that just slowly became normal. There was a time before we all had smartphones or camera phones. Normal shifts, that's what I'm trying to say here. And look, the normal is weird right now, I think. According to layoffs.fyi, tech companies laid off 263,000 employees in 2023. That's a number I can't even comprehend. And 50,000 already in 2024. And probably some people in this room have been laid off, and that really sucks, and I'm sorry that that happened to you. You deserve better. We've had layoffs before, of course, in tech. I remember the bloodbath that was 2001. But the difference back then, those were companies that were not making any money, that were shutting down. And I don't remember, someone tell me if they have a different perspective, but I don't remember a time when we had layoffs from companies posting record profits. It feels different. But of course, I don't know. I'm in my own context. Some of the layoffs are people who were in companies for a really long time, like 15 years, 20 years, in the same place, in that village. And bam, it's gone. You're severed from your village. It's like some of the messages people posted on LinkedIn, just really, really sad, actually. People who are not sure they don't know how to survive in the real world. They're like, I just don't know if I even have skills, if I'm employable anywhere else. It's like really rough stuff. And you can say, oh, I hope you don't, but you can say, oh, well, they should have blah, 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 blah. But it's a fragile system if one person can have a user error and have devastating outcomes. This group knows that, if anyone does. Up until now, tech jobs have been unusually well paid. We have been very lucky. They've been unusually safe in the midst of upheaval happening anywhere else. So from inside our tech bubble, it might have been easy not to notice what has been happening to other people. But the roles and status of tech jobs is getting kind of weird as well. It's kind of interesting. And you know, we can be in our, with slow-moving change, we can not notice it happening. Of course, outside our bubbles, bigger things are happening, even bigger. Like, we used to be in a software world where software affected software people, mostly. And you know, it's like a few different groups, but by now, tech affects the real world in just every way, like everything. Like tech is now self-driving cars, 2-ton robots roaming the streets with you know, the power to make decisions. It's like, cool. Tech is algorithmic bias. Tech is sweatshops doing content moderation and content labeling. It's panopticons and masses of data for every action you take, not just online, but kind of in the real world too. It's systematically knocking down careers that people used to think were really safe. And it's massively personalized radicalization, which, by the way, this year, almost half the world's population is going to vote. And we have massively personalized radicalization. And you know, there are people in this room who have really nuanced, smart thoughts on everything you know, every one of those things, and many more. I've had some great conversations about AI at this conference from people in very different perspectives, some of whom changed my mind and some of whom didn't. But they were all valuable conversations. And we need to sort of think about these issues together because like, we don't know what the answers are. A lot of the time, we don't even know what the questions are. We don't know how to frame what's going on. We just kind of go, something. We don't even know how to think about it. But then, you know, there are small things in front of us, like the little plastic cows in front of us, our pet cattle, maybe. And we, you know, we love them, and that's good too. And they are important, because they're important to us in our context. But the other things are further away, and they're more important. And of course, like 1,000 other things are happening. Social media shift is happening, or has happened. Yeah, AI is absolutely happening, or LLMs at least. The external perception of the tech industry is changing. The word enshittification appeared in the Financial Times. Like, what a time to be alive. Now is a weird time. But what happens next? Is this point on the graph a point? Or is it a trend? Like, what's going to happen? Well, one of the articles I found said that women will have all the wealth of the country by 2025. This is an article from, I dropped my attribution, but this is an article from the New York Times in 1929. 1929, they had no idea what was ahead of them. But then, do we know what's ahead of us? I also found this physicist in 1960 who reckons humanity is going to self-annihilate in November 2026. So women of the country, we need to spend the entire wealth of the country by then. So get expensive hobbies, you know? Now, I think both of these predictions are probably wrong, but I don't know what is going to happen. I'm not going to stand here and be like, I am a futurist, pay me 50 grand for my futurism, but something's going to happen. A lot is going to happen. And when we talk about the history of computing, we act like it's all the things that happened until now. But it's easy to forget that it's still happening. We are part of the history of computing right now. Us, in this room, this is part of the history of computing. Isn't that amazing? It's part of the history of humanity, and we're here in it at this conference. And for everything that happens to do with tech, we are going to be part of it. Like, isn't that an amazing privilege? Isn't that a terrifying responsibility? When we're inside the bubble, it's very easy for the future to feel inevitable, but it's not. It's decisions that are happening all of the time. And like when you're inside an all-encompassing company, like the reality that it can set for you is very strong. And okay, you should know what your employer cares about. Like They would like to pay you for solving the problems that they have. And that's the job. And then the money can be exchanged for goods and services, as has been documented. But the business value is not the only responsibility, because we do live in a broader context, and we all have an individual moral responsibility, I think, to the humans and the societies affected by the things that we do, the things that our systems do. And we also have a responsibility to ourselves to not boil like a frog with its brain removed. But the thing is, I think we're well equipped for this, because as SREs, we seek a deeper understanding of the consequences of the actions we're taking. Like, we're wired for that. And we have a responsibility to think about those consequences, and we can do it. And not just like to the edge of our own component or our own team or our own company, but in general, like, what effect does this thing that we're doing have? Some of the people in this room are already kind of tech leaders of today. But there are also people in this room who will be the tech leaders of 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, maybe. And I mean, what will be different then? But whatever it is, like, we're well equipped for it, I think. And God, we seem to care. I love that about us. We really do seem to care. The future is barreling towards us. The canonically best science fiction show of all time, Babylon 5, this is true. This is also not a topical reference. Has this line, the avalanche has already started, it's too late for the pebbles to vote, but I reject that. Yeah, if you're a non-intact frog, absolutely. If you can get out of the strong reality projected by the context that you're in, you can't stop an avalanche, but you can affect what happens to the people in its path, including yourself. You can react to the changes, mitigate the bad stuff, and amplify the good stuff. Because like, as SRE types, we know that no matter how prepared we are, we can't prepare for everything. We don't know what will break. We know some stuff will break. And here, we don't know what will change, but we know a lot of things will change. So what do we do when we don't know what's going to break? Well, like John just said, we detect and mobilize and diagnose and resolve and learn. We invest in adaptive capacity, in our ability to shift perspective and learn and stay adaptable. We learn from surprises. We learn from each other, including people who seem, at the start, wrong. And we look for ways to make the systems, including the systems of ourselves, more resilient. We over-provision ourselves. We make sure that our own psychological health and opportunity and lives are not n+0 on the exact context that we're in. And yeah, we enjoy ourselves arguing about the right way to do operations. But when that way shifts again, which it will, we notice and we're ready to move. And we bring what we have learned so far into the next thing, because that's what we do. And we monitor the hell out of it, and we get 5-year graphs. It's going to be great. And we notice when business value conflicts with the real value that is our own value. And we make really deliberate decisions based on our own risk analysis and our own personal error budgets and what we are able to do, what we feel capable of. And we make sure no one's left on call alone. We take care of each other like we always have. Like Dr. Maslach said yesterday, we look for ways to make things a little better around here. And I love that. And we keep caring. That's all I have. Thank you very much.